Hello and welcome to another episode of LB Presents Unite on Purpose. I decided to put on this program because we are all about creating a purpose-driven movement towards unity. And our belief is that everybody should be seen and heard no matter who you are or the demographic that you live in. What if we could shift education, health, manufacturing, retail to create the face of modern business and the face of the modern world? So I decided to launch a series, and every single day coming up to our Unite on Purpose campaign, which is on the 30th of July, when we're going to kick off this campaign and unite people on purpose and on their purpose, I decided to launch every day an interviewing different people that have been through all our different programs, the Business School of Bob, and be able to understand why are they uniting on purpose and who are they. So today I welcome you, Scott Dixon from Flava, and he came into my business school. When was it, Scott? Was it
must have been no more, I think four years ago, maybe now.
4 years ago. Oh my goodness me. Okay, so Scott Dixon came in 4 years ago. And I remember him coming in, and he has the most incredible family business that creates the most wonderful spices and herbs that you will see in many of the supermarkets. I'm not going to give the game away too much because I want Scott to tell us his background and his story. So you are still very much the family business. Can you talk to me about your business and let everybody know who you are and where you came from?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a 44-year-old family business now, so I'm the third generation. So my granddad was a butcher and always based up in the northwest, up in Manchester, back in the 70s. A weird time where he was both a footballer for Manchester City and a butcher, which is a pretty rare combination that you can't really imagine happening these days.
I won't say that Leeds just went and is now going up top, seeing as I came from Leeds. We'll have that conversation later.
That's another time. Yeah. So yeah, football is in our blood still as well, very much being based in Manchester. But yeah, so he was a butcher, and he used to, with my dad, who kind of left school when he was really young, used to drive around a delivery van, taking meat everywhere. And they eventually started selling kind of sausage skins and rusk, which is like breadcrumb that's used in sausages. That was the kind of humble beginnings of the business. And I think the kind of eureka moment came in the sort of late 70s, 1976 actually, which is always famous as being the hottest summer ever, which is when they had a bit of a moment just mixing old Kenwood Chef kitchen mixer. They'd been to a Chinese restaurant, which obviously was starting to grow more and more in the 60s and 70s, and had some Chinese ribs, and basically tried to have a stab at making their own kind of marinades and glazes. So just made it up in their car park and started giving it out to people. And eventually they started obviously adding value to meat products into the butchers, who were just doing kind of pure out and out meat. There was no real added value in that market at that time. So Chinese was the first one, and then it kind of grew from there. That bloomed into a massive range of products and grew rapidly all over the country. So they sold their butchers and really focused on that added value side of things. So that happened for kind of 40 years. Until we started, obviously the high street changed a lot, as you all know, Lindsay, over the last kind of 20, 30 years, it's changed dramatically. So you can't just rely on the butchers anymore, unfortunately, because there's nowhere near as many on the high street, albeit we've still got a strong trade in there. But the business then diversified into the other areas. So retail, the big meat, fish, veg, plant-based processors now increasingly, and also working with the restaurant trade. So today we sit at the heart of the food industry, kind of supply 3 or 4 sectors, which is great for us because it gives us that maneuverability, and we see what food trends are happening and what's going on in those different things. So today we produce, we've got about 15,000 recipes on our system. We produce every type of sauce, every type of seasoning you can imagine for all 4 of those sectors. So yeah, it's pretty diverse.
Gosh, there are so many questions that I want to ask you, Scott, and we only have half an hour. So I'm going to kick off with actually one that is dear to my heart. You come from an entrepreneurial background, your grandfather and your father, and I was also brought up in an entrepreneurial family. What was that like for you, growing up as a child and being around the business and then growing and then actually entering into the business?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think my granddad, he's still around, in his late 80s, but he pops in and makes sausages every now and then and causes havoc. But he's an out and out salesperson. He was just I used to say he'd get sales by just war of attrition, because he'd just talk people to death, and you pay him for stuff just to get him out your shop door. But he's everybody's best friend, and he still is today. So we launched a new range of products a few weeks ago, and he was out in his full suit. So I wanted to go out speaking to butchers and stuff. So you can't take that away from him. When he left the business, he went into selling saxophones. He had to always be selling something. And then my dad was more of a kind of operational entrepreneur, I guess. So we went from a really small little unit in South Manchester, Stockport Way. And he really scaled the business up. So he looked at it and said, how can we scale this up so that we can be working with the retailers and the like on that? And so, yeah, my dad was very much ops. He was always in and out of the factory side of things. And I think what we said before, but growing up, I just used to think that's what all dads smelled like, spices, because he used to come home every night smelling kind of Chinese or mint or whatever it might be. Obviously, years later, I found out that was just my dad. You can still smell those smells driving past on the motorway if you're on the M56. But yeah, so it was different, and I think that was what was quite interesting for me, really, because I never saw myself when I was growing up in a business. It was quite different then. It was kind of a bit, probably what I would say, bulk ugly kind of stuff. And like yourself, I was kind of always really excited about the brand part of it and how we could build that. So I went into advertising world originally. And then I guess I started to see that there was an opportunity in the family business, because food was starting to be more rock and roll than ever. And a lot of the food businesses seemed very clinical to me. And just because they're a food business doesn't mean it has to be functional and clinical. The emotional part of it is everything when it comes to food. So how can we capture that a little bit more? That was the bit that I got excited about. And that's when really I started doing a bit of work in the weekends for the business, and then eventually realized, so I moved back up from London and started working for the business about 8 years ago now. And yeah, it's been a baptism of fire over the last 7 years, to be quite honest. But yeah, it's amazing you learn a lot of stuff. So I've learned a lot of the sales I know from my granddad. I've learned a lot of the operational stuff from my dad, and hopefully now I bring a slightly new angle from a brand angle and a purpose angle as well. I think is a really key part for me.
Okay, so you've covered a few points there, and obviously you've covered one of my favorite topics, which is brand. And when you walked in the school, Scott Dixon, we hit it off, and we had many conversations about building businesses that were brand led. And I've always felt that people that came from a brand background, and I'm not talking about branding, logos, look and feel, I'm talking about building the business model around brand. Actually, the future really lies in that space. So I'm quite keen, because you came in the school 4 years ago. So I'm quite keen to know, how did you transition your role, really leading with the brand and really understanding purpose and commercial at the same time? How did you transition that into the business, and what has happened in those 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real interesting one since the kind of day that I did stuff with you guys and met you and Darren as well separately. And I think the reason it clicked for me is it just gave a kind of, it gave me an easier way of talking about it with the rest of the team here, because it was what I felt anyway. I just didn't necessarily have the words to get it out. So I think the frameworks you guys do have been amazing for me on that. And I still use a lot of stuff that I did then. At the very start, slightly different branding. Now you've evolved as well, but yeah, I think, but yeah, I think it really coincided with the fact that when I came into the business, to be honest, the business was struggling. It was stalling to an extent, because we'd grown kind of year after year, and we're a very profitable business for kind of 20 odd years. And we'd still been bringing in revenue. So commercially, we were still bringing in revenue, but we weren't actually making any profit. We'd built lots and lots and lots more products. So built thousands of products and a real long tail, I suppose, as a business.
Yeah.
And actually, what had happened over those years is since my granddad and my dad started that in the 70s, so many more businesses had come into the space. So it became incredibly saturated with other businesses offering seasoning, spices, glazes, sauces, all that type of stuff. And, you know, there's thousands of them in the UK now. So I guess really it kind of coincided, and it was what gave me the insight that actually those two things are really connected. The fact that we're making less profit and the fact that we're not leading from a brand perspective, we're leading from a product perspective, are actually intrinsically aligned. And that really is, that was a kind of moment for me that I could use that with, you know, someone like my dad, who was an operational person, and he's not as in the business as much these days. I had to take over for a few family reasons a couple of years after I came into the business. So again, baptism of fire with stuff. I remember. But that gave me the opportunity. Yeah, it was probably just as you guys were starting to work together. And I think some of the stuff I was saying, people here, you know, been in the business 30 years and very operational led and product led. They thought I was nuts and I was coming up with, you know, fluffy stuff from London and not really understanding the way it worked. And it, as I say, it gave me the framework to be able to talk about that. And what I realized is that actually creating great flavors isn't enough anymore. There's so many, and people can copy your products cheaper, faster, better, near instantly with kind of the information access everyone has today. So how do we lead from a brand perspective? And that was really about capturing the emotional part of food. How do we capture that and build that into our brand? Because everybody eats and everybody can get passionate about food. Some people have a good relationship, some people have a bad relationship, but everybody has a relationship with food. So how do we appeal to people on that level? So we think of our kind of, even our B2B customers, if we're working with one of the supermarkets or whatever, they're still consumers. They still eat. So how do we get them excited more than our competitors do, just from a personal level and a food level? And we started building that into kind of every touch point that we have in the business, from the way you walk in our business here. You can probably see the letters behind me. It looks like it's
fantastic. I love it. It's just so rock and roll. It's fantastic.
But yeah, I'm in our kind of some of our development kitchens now. We've been obviously running the whole way through COVID because of a few business, but and I think, yeah, just the journey through the place is really important for us. We try and make the whole of our kind of factory and offices feel more like a kind of kitchen than it feels like a factory, because that's when it connects with people a bit more emotionally, and everyone's got a story and a pie that their grandma cooked or something that they had in Thailand or whatever it might be. So our real objective is capturing that stuff and bottling it. That's what we're all about these days. And eventually it took a long time. It took me years to really build a team and build a kind of an acceptance within the business. And don't get me wrong, some people were aligned with it and some people weren't at first. But it's been a slog at parts, but it's definitely, we're at a point now where we just started to attract the right people, because it was stuff that people really associate with. So we were bringing in, and we've got sales teams now who've worked for massive brands and businesses, and I brought them in based off the fact they were super foodie and they wanted to share what we do a little bit more in food and actually tap into it on an emotional level, not just a functional level. So that's been built into our kind of business model now, and I think the thing that took the longest was commercializing that model. We're in a really good place with that now.
So Scott, you know I'm going to ask you this question because you know what my calling card is. You've been around me long enough now. Indeed. I really want to know, what are you known for? Can you tell my audience, what is it that you're known for, Scott? And then we can discuss that.
Yeah, so what I'm known for and what we're known for is capturing the excitement, the stories, and the emotion behind food, bottling that, converting it into something amazing, and then sharing that with as many people as we possibly can, and making it more accessible, more relevant, more affordable. So in simple terms, making great food and flavor more accessible is what really drives us, and what we try and do every day.
And I remember when you came in the school, there was a campaign idea that you had that was all around, like, you know, I'm trying to remember what it was, something around feeding the world or enabling the whole world feed or something. And it inspired me so much because of the DNA that sat within you and how you really passionately cared about food, but not just from an edible space or even from a spicy space, which I know you were brought up with, but actually the emotional side of it, how it makes you feel. And you had this real passion and purpose around feeding people. Could you kind of talk to me a bit about that as well? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing about, as I said, really food and flavor is universal. You know, it transcends language, it transcends countries, everything. You can sit down with people who don't even speak your language and share kind of enjoyment and excitement and laughter and about food. And because it is so universal, it means that you can kind of use it as a positive tool to change lots of things. Yes, there is a business element to that in terms of what we do for the businesses and the brands we work with. But actually, it's much, much broader. It can kind of drive positive change in education. It can drive positive change in healthcare, in so many different avenues. So I think probably a good example to draw is some of the stuff we do with some of the local schools around here. So we do everything on the same site. So we manufacture here, everything's done here, and it means we're kind of close to it the whole time, and you can smell it and see it. But also, we're like a lot of industrial businesses. We're in quite a poor demographic area, so it's a lot of the schools around us don't really have any kind of food education or anything going on as part of it. And so what we started doing was we actually started really speaking to a lot of the team that work here and the schools that a lot of their children went to around the place, because I always think it's better to start right here with the business and on our doorstep. So we bring schools in here now, and yes, we use food as a kind of mechanism to speak to them and associate with them. But actually, we try and do something a lot more, which is kind of broaden horizons and openings. It's not all about that they might work in food going forward, although that is definitely a way of opening it up. But what we do is take them on a journey when they come here. So again, use that kind of emotional stuff of they start looking at a concept or an idea, and then they go into our product development labs and build that out as a product. They then come upstairs and cook it. They then see it made in the factory. And actually, like, the difference, honestly, it makes is insane. You'll get kids coming in here who they struggle to meet your eye and talk to you for various different reasons, and lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. But by the time you've taken them through that process, and they're talking to you about what brand they love and what stuff they make and why they'd love to make this in their cooking lessons versus, you know, stuff that they're not interested in other lessons, it's amazing. And I think that the main thing it does is it does open up people, some of them, their horizons in terms of what jobs and things they might go into. But generally, the better thing is actually getting them speaking and engaging and talking to you. And I think that's just a small demonstration for me of how powerful a tool food and flavor can be, because it can take it away from just the usual way you try and break down barriers. So I think that kind of, we're all big believers in the business now, everyone we've got here, in kind of that immense power of food and flavor. And I think it's about how do we use that for wider good? How do we share what we know and what we've learned? And as a family business, it's super important that we do that as much as we can, not just from a business and a commercial perspective.
So you touched on how do we do that for the wider good? And so now I'm going to ask you, because you've obviously shared with me you're known for and your purpose. What is it? What's the vision? Where are you moving to, Scott? I know it's been a family business. It's been around you for a very long time. And I also know you very well. And you are a brand guy, and you've got very good vision, and you're very passionate and caring about, you know, you've just spoken around the kids side of things. Where are you moving? What's your vision for it with the business moving forward?
Yeah, I think as a business, the kind of key thing and the thing that I mentioned earlier that you guys, I suppose, were really instrumental in helping me kind of vocalize was that the commercial aspect and the purpose-led aspect happen in unison if you get it right. And it took us a while to get around to that, to figure out how that worked. But a big part of it now is we started working as a business with not just, as I say, creating flavors and stuff, because there's so many businesses doing that out there. we start looking at, we work with a lot of partners now. So we work directly with supermarkets, we work directly with big restaurant chains. And what we try and do is try and create a bespoke solution for what their need is or what their gap is. So we've just launched a load of products under Yo Sushi, Japanese brand. We launched that into Tesco because they had a gap. But what we always try and do with that now is, because we're working with those partners, we'll look at how we capture their kind of flavors, their theatre. So for us, it was Japanese cuisine in that particular example. And how do we take that into kind of retail? We have a whole host of different brands that we're going to be doing that with over the next few years. I think the great thing is every one of them we build in our kind of purpose-led part of it as well. So with every one of them, with Yo, for example, where they do what's called a ninja school, which is something that already existed within their business, which is teaching kids how to make Japanese food, but sushi and all the rest of it. Very kind of similar principle, and that's why we aligned, because actually it was, okay, they're making Japanese stuff, but actually it was more the process of doing it, cooking and opening up, and kids that wouldn't maybe necessarily get that chance to do that. So what we're doing going forward really is every new relationship, every collaboration we create, we build in that purpose-led aspect as well. So we'll say, look, we're going to dedicate a certain percentage of our profits to going into that particular fund. We have a fund now as well, copy kind of you guys in that respect.
Oh my goodness.
So that's good. So we're building a lot of stuff into that, and a percentage of everything we do goes into that, and then it comes back into those school projects that we're starting to build. And the vision really, I think, is to try and do that on a much bigger scale. So we're really looking at my next year's targets. How do we use food and flavor to positively influence the lives of over 1 million people in the next year? We've made good headway on.
Scott, so everybody can hear what you just said. How
do we use food and flavor to positively influence the lives of over 1 million people? That's this year's objective.
Go for it, Scott. That's
so, yeah.
Scott that I know. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I think again, it's the great thing is that can happen in so many different ways. So we partner with a particular charity. It's got a lot of press recently, actually, because of Marcus Rashford doing stuff with school dinners. But that's a lot of food donation stuff. So we we sent the equivalent of about already about 500,000 meals go to those guys from us. But also the kind of bigger picture, I suppose, is really how do we use this food and flavor as a tool to change lives in other ways as well. So spotting gaps and needs that happen. One particular one, which I think is really relevant, is a lot of kids are going to have to be from next year paying to do any for ingredients to do any food to cook in schools. So we're looking at a whole campaign where we're going to be looking at generating the cash to be able to pay for that, because it's not a lot. It'll be probably the equivalent of about £5 a week, but to some people that's just rules it off the table. And we think that that's devastating because of, again, the effect that food can have. At the end of the day, Fair Share are really big on pushing this, which is that a lot of the time kids come back after school holidays, and as we've seen recently in the press about meals over the summer holidays, and they can't concentrate at work at school because they haven't had the nutrition. So we're big believers, unless you get that bit right, a lot of the other stuff can't happen. So yeah, that'll be a lot of us. The whole campaign will be focused on sponsoring the cooking lessons at school, but also across the summer holidays and holidays. How do we get kids involved in cooking classes to get the meal that they need off the back of it, but also get involved in that and have more kind of time with friends and stuff in a kind of safe and fun environment as well.
So, Scott, I am giving you your Unite on Purpose bag, and I'm passing this to you through the computer. And in that bag are the keys to the city. And you're able to unite everybody on your purpose for one day. Boris has gone on holiday for the day, and it's you. What are you going to do? What would you like to do with that?
What I'd love to do with that is to try to use food and flavor to make the world a less hungry place. So how do we use this great weapon? How do we capture the excitement that so many people around the world have on food, and think of just one way to use that productively, one way to positively influence the life of just one other person with it? Because if we can get everybody who's passionate about food to do that, just in one small way in that day, then it will affect the lives of billions of people all over the world. So that's the main thing I'd love people to do.
I have to say that we, Bob, as you know anyway, will be massively behind you when you're campaigning and around you. And there are people, quite a few people that have come through, and as you know anyway, through the L&D program and through the Bob schools and so forth. And if we can go and shift the world of food and drink and enable the world to be a less hungry place, then we have all done our jobs, I believe, in society. And I put that call out to everybody that's watching this live webinar. If you would like to join that campaign and be around Scott, and there are other people that want to do that, then do contact us through this live and we will get you in touch and we will see if we can make a difference and campaign that to actually leave the world a less hungry place. Scott, thank you so much. It goes so quickly, the half an hour. Thank you for coming on. I absolutely love hearing your story. I do want to know, would you be the next Jamie Oliver? Is your personal brand going to lead the charge before you leave?
I like to think I'm more of an advocacy model, which some of my team pushed me to try and be more of that guru celebrity. But no, I definitely like advocating, and I don't think any one person can be the expert on everything food. So I love collaborating with people and trying to understand their passion and how we can use that more. So yeah, I try and put myself more on the top left as it occurs in your model.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks
it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
And thank you very much for joining me again on this program. That was another episode with Scott Dixon, and tomorrow I have the beautiful, lovely Sam Smith. Yes, a girl, not a boy. And she is a massive entrepreneur in her own right. She has been a force in the wealth and finance space, and I would highly recommend that you join and tune in tomorrow because she is my guest at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And if you would like to, come and join me on the Bob Earth Facebook group, where I will be spinning around on this as a citizen of the earth, or you can join me on bobearth.com, and you can also come and join the Quiet Revolution. Shh. See you tomorrow at 5.